What happens when a young captain dares to defy empires and rewrite Africa's story overnight? That is exactly what Ibrahim Traoré did, and since that moment, the world has not stopped whispering his name. To some, he is a rebel. To millions, he is Africa's most fearless leader. But what truly makes him fearless? Is it the coup, the confrontation with the West, or the larger vision of a continent free at last? Let's dive into the story. To understand Traoré's rise, we need to step back. Burkina Faso, a landlocked country often ignored in global headlines, was a nation battered by insurgent attacks, by poverty, and by promises of reform that never materialized. Villages were burning, families were being displaced, and a tired population felt abandoned. It was against this backdrop that, on one ordinary night, a young officer in his mid-30s appeared on national television. In full fatigues, with a calm but resolute voice, he declared, "Burkina Faso will no longer be a pawn." It wasn't just a political statement, it felt like history itself speaking through him. The response was immediate. In Ouagadougou, crowds surged with relief. Flags of Burkina Faso waved high, and portraits of Thomas Sankara, the revolutionary leader assassinated decades earlier, reappeared in the streets. The people did not run in fear of soldiers, they danced in joy. For them, this was not a coup. It was the reclamation of a dream, a rebirth of sovereignty that had been stolen from them for generations. Western diplomats, of course, issued their predictable condemnations, urging a return to constitutional order. But their words rang hollow when compared to the images flooding social media across Africa. Images of people celebrating, chanting, crying tears of pride. While foreign powers saw danger, Africans saw courage. While outsiders whispered about instability, millions whispered a different truth. Someone had finally stood up for African dignity without waiting for foreign approval. The uniqueness of Traoré's rise lay not just in the act of seizing power, but in the conviction behind it. He did not hesitate. He did not wait for international consensus. He acted with the clarity of a soldier who had already seen too many funerals, too many broken promises, too many empty speeches. For the people, this speed and boldness suggested something rare in politics: conviction over calculation. Soon, the headlines became continental debates. From Lagos to Nairobi, Kinshasa to Johannesburg, Africans asked, was this the start of a new era of fearless leadership, or another doomed cycle of military rule? Elites feared the inspiration his example could spread. Ordinary citizens, however, felt something far more profound: ownership. A sense that, finally, one of their own had dared to refuse dependency. But what makes a leader truly fearless? Is it simply the act of taking power? Or is it the courage to hold it against storms that follow? For Ibrahim Traoré, the test came quickly. And he did not shy away. Fearlessness is often misunderstood. It is not recklessness. It is not the absence of fear. It is clarity in the face of risk. It is the ability to see danger clearly, yet refuse to be blinded by it. Traoré embodied this clarity. He was not a polished diplomat. He was not educated in Western capitals. He did not come from a privileged political dynasty. His school was the battlefield, his education the barracks. He lived the consequences of insecurity, of poverty, of dependency. For him, leadership was not a career move, it was survival dressed as duty. And this is where his fearlessness revealed itself most clearly, in his refusal to follow the easy path. He could have accepted foreign funding, managed decline quietly, and ensured his own comfort. Instead, he stepped into the storm, choosing confrontation over compromise, dignity over comfort. What separates him further is his relationship to time. Most leaders in fragile states delay hard decisions, waiting for better conditions or permission from international institutions. Traoré does the opposite. To him, waiting is the real enemy. Fear is not just about losing battles, it is about losing time, condemning another generation to cycles of despair. This urgency is magnetic, especially to Africa's youth, scrolling on their phones from Dar es Salaam to Dakar. They see in him a reflection of their own impatience, the refusal to accept empty promises of a brighter tomorrow. But fearlessness is not just about speed. It is also about acceptance. From the beginning, Traoré seemed to accept that his choices painted a target on his back. Coups are fragile. Assassinations are possible. Sanctions are inevitable. Yet he acted anyway. That calmness, the calm of someone at peace with sacrifice, unsettled even his opponents. And it inspired the masses. His message was simple: if I can face the storm, so can you. Still, defiance is always tested against the empire. And in Africa, empire often wears the face of the West, aid disguised as chains, bases planted on foreign soil, and exploitation hidden beneath diplomatic smiles. For Traoré, the clash came almost immediately, and nowhere was it more visible than in the presence of French troops. For years, France had operated in Burkina Faso under the banner of fighting terrorism. Yet insurgent attacks did not stop. Villages continued to burn. To many Burkinabe, this military presence felt less like protection and more like occupation. Traoré's decision to expel French forces was therefore seismic. It was not just about security, it was symbolic. It was the dismantling of a pillar of neo-colonial control. Western media branded it reckless, a dangerous gamble. But the people saw liberation. As French convoys left under the gaze of jubilant crowds, chants of independence echoed through the streets. For Africans watching from across the continent, the images were electrifying. Here was a leader confronting empire head-on, and still standing tall. But confrontation comes at a cost. Aid slowed. Sanctions were whispered about. Development projects were threatened. Western analysts painted him as a reckless populist dragging his country into ruin. Yet in African discourse, the question was framed differently. How long must a continent remain dependent on outsiders to secure its borders, feed its people, and manage its resources? Traoré answered by seeking alternatives. He turned to Mali and Niger, envisioning a coalition of sovereign states, the AES alliance, that could stand shoulder to shoulder. He opened new doors to Russia and China, not as masters, but as partners. This terrified Paris and Washington. Not because Burkina Faso is wealthy, but because symbols spread. If one captain could defy the empire, others might follow. And indeed, debates erupted across Africa. Could Ghana, Nigeria, or Senegal produce such defiance? Could Africa finally stand as one? But Traoré's leadership is not defined by rejection alone. True fearlessness is about building in place of what was destroyed. Saying no to empire is only half the story. What fills the vacuum matters even more. And here, Traoré reached back into Africa's greatest unfinished dream: unity. For decades, Pan-Africanism had been treated as nostalgia, slogans, faded posters of Kwame Nkrumah and Sankara, speeches that sounded good but achieved little. Traoré revived it with urgency. To him, African unity is not an ideal. It is survival. Climate change, economic exploitation, and security threats are not national problems. They are continental wounds. And only continental solutions can heal them. His speeches began calling for Africa to build its own currency, its own institutions, its own defense capacity. To the youth, it sounded like common sense. Why should 1.4 billion people remain fragmented and weak when unity could transform them into a global force? And unlike many before him, he pursued tangible steps. He aligned with Mali and Niger for joint security. He pushed for regional management of resources. He called for industrial projects that would keep wealth in Africa instead of leaking out. This vision shifted the debate. Instead of asking whether unity was possible, Africans began asking, how can it be achieved? Critics warned that his vision was unrealistic, that Africa had tried unity before and failed. Others argued that Burkina Faso's domestic needs, jobs, education, infrastructure, should take priority. Yet, even in criticism, his power was evident. He had moved the conversation from resignation to imagination. He had forced Africa to dream again. And that, perhaps, is his greatest act of fearlessness. To wage war not only against empire, but against hopelessness itself. Traoré has redefined what leadership means in Africa. For decades, leaders measured success by how long they stayed in power. Traoré measures it by how much dignity is restored. His choices are not about survival games. They are about transformation games. He accepts risk openly, even publicly, and that vulnerability makes him more powerful than propaganda ever could. Across the continent, his image circulates like wildfire. Posters of him appear in youth movements. Nigerian students debate his example. South African radio callers compare him to revolutionaries of the past. Social media amplifies him into a symbol. Memes call him Africa's lion, videos show him standing calm in the storm. And while Western powers see danger, Africans see themselves. Farmers in Burkina Faso say he carries their anger and their hope. Jobless youth see proof that courage is possible, even in a rigged system. He does not promise instant prosperity. What he promises is dignity, and dignity, once awakened, spreads like fire. That is why millions call him fearless. Not because he is invincible, but because he is vulnerable and still acts anyway. He knows the risks. Coups are fragile. Retaliation is certain. Assassination is possible. Yet he moves forward. This acceptance of risk, lived in the open, turns him from politician into symbol. And symbols terrify empires. Because symbols spread. For Western powers, Traoré is dangerous not because Burkina Faso is strong, but because his example could multiply. For local elites, his presence is threatening because it exposes their cowardice. In comparison, his courage reveals their compromises. So the story comes full circle. Fearlessness is not a single act. It is a chain of decisions that form a philosophy. Ibrahim Traoré's philosophy is simple: freedom before comfort, dignity before aid, unity before silence. Millions call him fearless because he dares to live by that philosophy openly, and because, in his defiance, they rediscover their own strength. And that may be the truest measure of leadership. Not how loudly history remembers your name, but how deeply it changes the way people believe in themselves. So the question now is, can Ibrahim Traoré's fearlessness truly reshape Africa's future? Or will empire and compromise attempt to silence this new spirit? Let us know what you think in the comments. Do you see him as a symbol of hope, or a threat to those who fear change? And if you want more stories like this, remember to subscribe, like, and share. Because this is not just a channel. This is a movement, a space where African dignity, Black culture, and our global story are celebrated without apology. Stay tuned, because the story of Africa's fearless leaders has only just begun.